Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sue. It's nice to see you.
Hey, good to see you too, Jen. It's been
Hey.
a while.
I know it has been a while. I thought it would be a really nice idea to just spend some time and an opportunity to have a chat with each other and a little bit of peer supervision and a bit of time of reflection over the last, where are we at now? Year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought we could just kind of reflect on, the fact that we've both known each other for a long time, but we're also both, not only are we friends, we're both therapists and have been for some time. But I was just thinking, actually, I know that you are a counsellor like myself, we're both in private practice, but I thought we might want to take a moment just to talk about what we do alongside our private work, because I don't know if we've talked about that before, so our backgrounds. Shall I go first?
Sounds good. You go first, Jen.
So I've been in private practice for 2 years now. I've had a private counselling practice running on my own for 2 years, but before that, and the way I kind of went into counselling was at the ripe age of 23, I went into the NHS and worked for the eating disorders unit based in Devon as a nursing assistant, and I did that for 4 years. Before that as well, I worked with children with behavioural issues and learning disabilities, predominantly in schools, and that's kind of how I segued myself into mental health, which has got nothing to do with my film degree, which shows how varied we can end up being.
Who does something to do with their degree these days? None of us do we?
Somewhere, I'm sure. But yeah, so I worked in the eating disorders unit for 4 years as a nursing assistant, part of a multidisciplinary team. Learned a hell of a lot, worked alongside psychologists, dietitians, consultants, nurses, and thought to myself, do I want to go into the route of kind of nursing, or do I want to look into more occupational therapy? But actually there's therapists in my family, so I come from a line of therapists, and decided to go down the counselling route, and that's what I've done. So alongside my private work, I've also worked in varying LGBT plus community support services, charitable organisations. I work for carers, and at the moment I work for a specialist service within the NHS again, alongside my practice. So there you go, Lou.
There you go. Wide kind of variety, and long history of kind of mental health work. More so than me, really. I suppose my background was teaching. As you know, I was a teacher for about 10 years. I went into special schools. I worked with with young people with emotional behaviour problems, difficulties. I worked then in Exeter, actually. I worked at WESC, which was the school for young people with visual impairments and complex needs. And I've always worked with lots and lots of different sort of, like you were saying, with occupational therapists, with nurses, with speech and language therapists. And I think counselling is something I thought about for quite a long time. But I didn't start training till we actually moved. I'm down in Newquay, until we moved down here about 7 years ago. And I set up private practice with 2 other counsellors down in Cornwall. And I've spent the last couple of years working at Falmouth University. So counselling students, which I love. I think it's a really nice age group, that sort of university age group.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you have been working slap bang in a very important demographic of university students stuck in a lockdown.
It's been a really interesting year, actually, with the university students, and it's funny because we're a similar age, aren't we? And I think back at our sort of university experience and the experience they're having now, and it's something else. It's going to university, it's being in a bubble with the people they live with, all their lessons are online, not those social acts. It's very, very isolating. So I think it's a really hard time to be at university. And I know the number of inquiries to the sort of the wellbeing, the wellbeing centre has just gone through the roof over the last year. So
yeah, that's interesting, is it? Because I think even before the pandemic, I used to find that university could either be a very, very social time or an incredibly isolating time. And if anybody had anything pre-existing, for example, eating disorders, they could end up being quite exacerbated, because all of a sudden you're on your own and those behaviours can kind of run. So do you think there's been a resurgence or an increase of kind of pre-existing mental health stuff?
Definitely. I think you're absolutely right. I think university can either be this wonderful experience or it can be very, very isolating. I know a lot of students I've spoken to, they've gone to university with these big hopes of what it's going to be, like people do. And actually the reality just hasn't lived up to that. And I think, feeling really kind of isolated, feeling very disconnected from people. And I think when that happens, as people start then getting a bit disconnected from themselves. They're not sleeping in later, they're not eating well, and that triggers maybe feeling a bit lower, and feeling like that, there's a knock-on effect on kind of self-esteem and that self-confidence. So I think it's and then it brings up lots of things from past as well. So I think it's had a huge impact. What have you found?
Sorry, what was that?
I can say, what have you found over this last year with your clients?
I don't tend to work with many students. My main client base tends to be sort of old adults, but I also work within the LGBT plus communities, and the work that I've done around people in regards to gender related issues. Not that gender dysphoria is a mental health issue, but kind of the connection alongside experiencing gender dysphoria, feeling trans. Predominantly the issue that I've noticed is people that have been waiting for surgeries. So there's some people that were waiting for gender surgery, and that has come to an absolute standstill for over a year now.
Wow.
And some of these people, initially, I think it was okay because we were all going through it. But I think now, like most of us, and I don't know about you, but I think I can relate to that. Initially, when the pandemic first started, I saw this kind of opportunity for a break for so many of us, and a bit of a clearer perspective and connection. There was a lot more connection in the first. For example, we would have Zoom parties.
We did have Zoom parties, didn't we? That first lockdown, we were all making so much effort, weren't we?
Yeah, there was a lot of creativity, there was a lot of connection. This time, kind of towards the end, so the last one, I have to admit, I can't remember if we were on the third or the second, but whichever one we were, this one that we are coming out of, I've noticed in all of my work that I do, everyone's very fatigued. Everyone has had enough. Maybe that kind of excitement of this kind of global permission to stop isn't enough now. We need the cogs to start moving again. So in regards to the specialist work, it's been very difficult, and yet again I've seen a resurgence in mental health, pre-existing mental health issues. So people, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that, it kind of makes a lot of sense to me that if we coped in maladaptive ways, and we have a history of that, this has been a very long time for people to cope. So I think for then suddenly those historical ways of coping that maybe we don't look at as very helpful coming back makes a lot of sense to me, but it's very difficult as a practitioner and very sad to know. I kind of understand why, and it's harder, I think, as a practitioner to combat that in a way. It's like, some people that I've worked with who have not self-harmed or coped in really, really unhelpful ways are having blips. So I guess the way I've supported that is just with a lot of forgiveness, a lot of understanding that it makes a hell of a lot of sense to me why we would be doing this right now. I think, I don't know if I've coped great all the time. You know, it's been rough, right?
Yeah, it has. And you know, I think that makes a lot of sense what you just said, because I think actually a huge part, I know I've heard myself say this a lot to clients, is actually just that not being so hard on yourself. You know, we're all living through this kind of extraordinary time, aren't we, that we've not lived through before. And you know, sort of, you know, it's understandable that people, like you said, are tired and they're feeling anxious and they're feeling worried. And you know, I've spoken to a lot of people, sort of clients and friends, who actually are feeling quite anxious about even now coming out of lockdown.
Yes.
And actually, you know, what's that going to look like, trying to sort of get back to some sort of social life, meeting people again. You know, I think social anxiety is a lot higher now, isn't it? That sort of
totally,
you know, how do I interact with people now? You know, we can't hug anymore. I'm not used to having interactions. And so
communication, isn't it? Yeah,
that feels like it's definitely something which is also people are finding a lot harder at the moment.
I mean, I've definitely heard as well an interesting perspective on the pandemic, which there are some people have been given permission to not have to interact, to not have to socialize, to not have to talk to certain family, to, you know, and actually that in itself might not in the longer term be the most helpful thing, but it makes a lot, again, it makes sense. It's interesting.
It does make sense for a lot of people. You know, we always think about the people who are really struggling with actually that kind of isolation and that loneliness, but for a lot of people with really kind of high social anxiety, like you said, it's almost given permission. You don't have to go to the pub, you don't have to meet friends, you don't have to do all these things, you don't have to push yourself, do you? You can really stay in your own little bubble. So I think for some people, I know some clients I've spoken to, they're feeling very, very anxious about sort of coming out of lockdown.
Yes, and it's like you said, isn't it? It's we've got to look after us. We've got to be kind to ourselves. This has been, it's been a global trauma. It's, you know, people have died in unbelievable amounts, and people have lost. There's been a lot of loss on a huge spectrum, hasn't there, from like the absolute end of life to kind of loss of identity, loss of age, loss of you know, it just goes.
There is. I know we all, you know, I think we're all so aware, aren't we, of the horrendous scale of loss of life. But like you said, I think there's that loss of, financially, people have lost so much money if they're losing businesses. There's that kind of loss of people with, like you said, almost kind of dreams and hopes, isn't it? People who haven't been able to have their weddings, have funerals, have you know, all those kind of milestone birthdays or whatever it might be. But actually people have missed out on so much this year as well, haven't they? I think it's been, you know, it's been a year like no other, hasn't it?
It's been an interesting one.
And I can see we're both tired today just doing this conversation.
Talking. I guess actually that's an interesting. How have you found online work?
You know, it's interesting. I know we mentioned this once before, but in some ways I've really liked it. I think it's been, you know, I think people are so much more used to, aren't they, doing Zoom now? God, we didn't even know what Zoom was, did we, a year ago or so? I think people are so much more comfortable doing things online now. So in some ways, I think it's a really, really nice way of actually connecting with people in their home. They're in the privacy of their own room or somewhere they feel comfortable. They haven't got to go out and travel. But also it is different. You know, it's very intense when you're doing these sort of sessions, and it's quite tiring. How do you find them?
It's been I've actually found what I started to do was actually do phone sessions, because I found these as a session in a counselling capacity very, very tiring. And there was a lot of the natural flow of counselling sessions could end up being broken by digital nonsense. So somebody could be saying something really powerful and then there would be a glitch.
Yeah.
And I'd either not hear it or they couldn't hear me. And I felt, or like there's moments where it reminded me of, like, if you watch Eurovision Song Contest, they're speaking to someone and it's like a 3-second lag.
Oh God, yeah, that's awful, isn't it?
For me, it was interrupting the organic flow of how I work. Not to mention, it's like, I can see your house, I can see your home, and I don't know how you feel about that in regards to boundaries and kind of the insight in which how comfortable somebody could be. But saying that, there has been some relationships that I've, for example, working with someone for over 2 years, we got to a relational depth in our work in the pandemic that I do not believe we could have done if we hadn't worked this way. So it almost sort of broke something up. And it kind of reminds me of, you know, when you were at school and you used to phone your friends and just speak for hours and hours to the point where your ear was hurting. No, I didn't do that. It was an hour session. But it kind of broke down the boundary to the point where they just went a bit deeper, a bit more vulnerable. And it's really built up a very strong bond that we haven't been able to get to in 2 years. So I feel, so that's been really special. So it's, for me, it's been a bit of a mix, if I'm honest. I've started going back to my practice rooms now, face to face.
How are you finding that, face to face sessions again?
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. No pressure for people to come back. I missed my things. I like being tactile. I do a lot of work with objects, or I like being able to just pull out some tools and some kit and play. And it for me, doing this sort of work, I could only get to a certain point before not being able to kind of roll up your sleeves. It's like, here we go, this is it now, this is the work. So I was kind of just coasting. Being congruent, being brutally honest, I felt a bit de-skilled as a counsellor doing this all the time. Didn't feel like I was able to do, you know,
all the practical sort of stuff that you like to do. It is interesting. It is a different experience, I think, doing these kind of definitely doing these videos. I just started doing kind of like walk and talk now, which is really nice. So I haven't gone back to my therapy room because I was based in a hotel. And you know, obviously there's kind of still a lot of concerns about that. So I started this walk and talk, and it's really nice actually, because I live on the beach here. We're doing a lot of beach walks, and I think the same as well. You know, you're saying about that experience of kind of looking at someone, and it's very weird today because I can see myself and I can see you because we're recording this. And usually I hide myself so I don't have to see myself, but that sort of I find quite hard. But I think when you're out walking, I think there's something very natural about it. You know, when you're walking in nature, you haven't got to look at that person. So if someone is a little bit nervous about meeting up with a counsellor, you know, you can actually just, you know, we can sit on the sand dunes, we can kind of watch the sea. And I think there's something really natural about it. So I'm really loving doing outside sessions. Beautiful. I don't think it's going to work in the winter, but I think over the summer months, I think it's a really good.
I think there's a lot to be said about working in nature, and actually that's something that I really drew from this pandemic, is bring it right back to simplicity. And nature for me was a real grounded sort of, it was a constant in a world where there wasn't, it felt very unusual and unnerving.
You're a real gardener, aren't you? I'm not.
I am.
I kill everything. I have a plant here which survives on a drop of water once every month. I can't grow anything. I'm always very jealous when I see your pictures of like tomatoes and all sorts of amazing things. I can't do that.
That's my therapy. Gardening came to me, and I would upset a lot of professional gardeners, I should think, who would think, but as my supervisor once said to me, you're an intuitive gardener, and I thought, yeah,
Oh, nice.
I like that.
You're like, I'll
I
take
like
that. Yeah.
And that's the interesting. That's why I call myself Bloom Counselling, which I didn't steal from this festival, by the way. But we'll just have to share this.
Yeah.
For me, it's a lot around. I take it from Carl Rogers, the dude that is, who is my foundation for most of my work. So actually, interestingly, what we haven't talked about is our theory approaches. I'm not sure. So personally, I'm an intuitive counselor.
Oh, and I just had a little glitch there, but I think you said integrative counsellor, and I would say the same. Yeah, I would say the same. Yeah.
How you like to share so many different theories, and like to always have a focus who I'm working with. So
You've gone a bit jiggy, Jen. You've gone a bit. My computer's going a bit funny for a second. Can't hear you. It's gone a bit jiggery. Technology, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shall I pause this for a second? Okay, I think we're back on again. We had a moment there where Zoom was playing up for us, but hopefully you can hear us again. So go on, Jen. You were just saying about the kind of model of counselling that you work with.
And that's why I don't like Zoom work, by the way.
That's why, yeah.
So integrative. I don't know if you would say, but it's kind of like a grab bag for me of different models, different theories, and depending on what that person needs and personality and who they are, I then kind of think about which theories are going to be the most helpful for that person. I also work open-ended, so there's no kind of agenda, if you will. But yeah, so for me, Carl Rogers, the man that is my foundation, which is sort of empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence, which is being real. And he once said about a potato, which is my favorite thing I like to talk about with most of my clients. So when he was a young boy, there was a potato in a bin, and he noticed that all those unfavourable conditions, it still had a condition and a strive to thrive. So somehow it still found a way to find the light. And for me, that's kind of the premise of survival and how we cope and how we are. And I think that's really been prevalent in what's happened this year, really. So for me, nature has been very important to kind of realise, like, I don't know, it's just been very grounding.
I like that, and I like the kind of nature and that us being maybe more resilient than we always think we are, and kind of I think that's a nice image.
Absolutely. So tell me, sorry, there's a cat yet again.
Gotta love a cat walking past. Yeah, go on.
Oh, that's the other thing. I like cats a lot, so I've coped by buying a lot of cats. Tell me how you found. So, do you mind sharing your experience of the pandemic personally, as just a person?
Just a person, not a counsellor. My experience. I'm dogs rather than cats, so the dog has been brilliant getting the dog out. But I think like you said, it's been a hard year, I think, or a very challenging year for a lot of people. I know personally, I know we're talking a lot about sort of counselling, but personally, I was in that shielding category. Having had having a chronic there's a new one, having a chronic health condition, sort of put me in that shielding category. So I know, last March, it was terrifying initially, I was getting the letters through saying you're clinically extremely vulnerable, to leave the house. I mean, I had one text through that said, ideally don't leave your house, you can crack open a window if you need to, or sit on your doorstep, and it was really quite scary. And I think, like we sort of said, I think it's going from maybe being somebody who I've always been quite sociable, I like seeing my friends, I like going out, to this feeling of actually, wow, I'm actually being told not to leave the house. That's really quite scary. And I think in some ways, you find things, don't you, to kind of help you. And I know for me, I loved all our kind of girly Zoom catch-ups, just was fantastic, that kind of support. I know connecting with friends was brilliant for me. I know working, much as I love to have a little moan about work, I think working has really helped kind of get that routine.
Right.
Knowing that I was kind of coming up here stairs, I was doing the counselling sessions, that really helped me.
Yeah.
But I think connecting with others, but I think it was pretty scary those first few months.
And I'm just thinking as well, like you said, work has been a release, but also you're holding on to legitimate fear. This was frightening. So you're working for others who may also be feeling a multitude of feelings, but actually you're also kind of managing this very unusual level of fear that we've never experienced before. And I think this is why it's been such a peculiar time as a practitioner. Is we've also, for example, with yourself, it's like, as a friend, it's like, how is this going to affect people like yourself that have had to shield, and how is this going to affect my friends? Am I going to never see my friends again? It's all this. It was layers of stuff, wasn't it?
You're right. And knowing that we're all kind of going through this COVID together, but in very, very different ways. It's affected everybody very differently, hasn't it? I know for some people, very much. I know for myself, it's very much been about health. My whole life has been about, gosh, if for some reason I do catch COVID, gosh, it's going to be very, very serious potentially. And so having those sort of thoughts that even when you leave the house, feeling nervous about being too close to people. I mean, it's just such a surreal experience. And yet, I know for other people, those worries have been more around, feeling distant from family or worried about, financially how they're going to cope, or being at home and being furloughed, or struggling. I mean, I don't have children. I know you've got two children, struggling with homeschooling, and so everybody's been kind of facing different challenges, haven't they, with what this year's looked like. So it's been
there's had to be a lot of authenticity really with the people we work with. The boundaries have had to be a little less rigid as they might be in a session, for example, because for example, I might be working at home and at the beginning have to say, hey, just to let you know, they're well trained, but my children might suddenly bang on the door, or and it was but thinking about both of us, I think we should take a moment. Actually, we've done bloody well. Haven't we?
I'm going to go with that. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. We have. It's been really challenging. And I think, honestly, that's something which I know I've said a lot, and I'm sure, you have too, is to people, is to just to be a bit less harsh on ourselves at the moment. I think just to have got through this year, I think is enough, without all this.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no magic wand or tool to make everyone feel better, really. Not that not that kind of gal anyway, but I think it is, if anything can come from this, more so than ever, is self-care. Absolute self-care. Like, say no if necessary, but also just be very kind to yourself. It's been a lot for our systems, to take on, a lot that we might be responding in ways we didn't even imagine, because it's triggering parts of us that we've never had to experience before. I mean, for me, I was kind of thinking a lot about being a teenager and being a kid and having these sort of feelings around just being a lot younger. And then I thought, oh, it's because the last time I wasn't allowed to leave my house without someone's permission was being a teenager. So it was bringing
so it's really brought back those memories.
So it's like I got really into music again, and really into kind of stuff that I hadn't thought about for it's been a very hardcore, yet I think reflective and interesting time as a practitioner and as a person, really.
I think so. And I think coming out of it, you know, I think it's just a case of just doing what you feel comfortable doing, because I know, you know, that there's I think so much you see on social media. I mean, that's a whole nother story, isn't it? Suddenly lockdowns lifting and we're supposed to be out having beach barbecues and meeting our friends and traveling to see family and doing this and doing that. And I think that can be a bit overwhelming. So I think as well, you know, one thing I'm trying to do for myself personally, you know, and I talk to clients about this too, is actually only doing what you feel comfortable doing now.
Totally.
You don't have to fill your diary up every weekend and every night and be doing everything. There's nothing wrong with just doing things at your own pace.
It doesn't have to be 0 to 60, does it? It can. No. And actually, for some people, it's been a blessing that they haven't seen their family. You know, let's be real here.
There will be people in that category, absolutely, yes.
And I think this is the thing. It's like, hopefully when we heal, we can also take some of our survival we've had to learn from this. Hopefully we can take into kind of our lives after. I hope some of this, some of our elements of connection, some of our elements of generosity, are ways of like being a sense of community, a sense of kind of well-being, checking in, different ways of communicate. I'm hoping we can hold on to some of that.
I hope so too. So I think that's something we've really seen over the last year, isn't it? Is actually that real connection and really supporting people. So many examples, hasn't there, of people kind of really kind of going the extra mile. So it would be lovely to see that carry on, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But there we go. I know a bit of a kind of reflection on what's been a year.
Not particularly any magic tricks, a bit more of a check-in, opportunity to reflect. Can be equally as important, I think. I
think so. And I think this is something, you know, we do as counsellors, isn't it? We do have our supervision, we do have peer supervision, where we can talk with other counsellors and kind of share, thank God, you know, share sort of how we're doing, how we're finding working with clients. You know, it can be really, really helpful. So it's always good to check in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to say, as practitioners, I'm sure you're with me, Lou, we wouldn't do the work we are doing unless we felt we could. And actually, it has been a challenging year as a professional. You're holding a lot of very intense grief and loss in various spectrums, but it's also been incredibly rewarding, and I'm so privileged to have had the opportunity to have this job in one of the hard times in our life. So it's sometimes holding so much unanswered, and uncertainty is quite overwhelming. But when you've got good communications with fellow practitioners like yourself, supervisors, we are able to continue, and we love what we do, and it has been a privilege, actually.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Absolutely.
Well, I think I'm ready to say adieu.
I think so too. Well, I say it's lovely that we got this chance to have a kind of a bit of a check-in, and I say, well, you know, sort of pass this on towards the Bloom Festival, and if anybody does watch this, you know, and you've stuck with us to the end, you know, I hope it's been, you know, I hope it's been helpful or just interesting to see a couple of therapists having this chat, and you know, I guess just really showing that. You know, it's something we're all going through our own experience, and I think the more we can share with each other, you know, the better.
Talking is good.
Talking is always good. We all know it, don't we? It can be hard to do. We all know it. Talking is always good.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks ever so much.
All right, and you too. And I will hopefully see you soon.
See you soon.
Okay. Take care.
Are you gonna